This morning I'm out in one of the drainage ditches for the farm fields, and I'm going to be harvesting duckweed. This is a plant called Lemna minor, and it's a really sort of phenomenal plant that does so many different things. And it's interesting to think that most of my life seeing this stuff, I thought it was kind of yucky. And you just think that's pond scum or some weird film that's growing on the top of water. And my association had always been that that meant that the water body was unhealthy. You would definitely not want to go swimming in that. And there's an element of truth to that, but it's a little bit more subtle. I think the reason for that is that it grows, for the most part, in really high nutrient context. So often in the modern world, that means some water body, like a pond or a stream, that is getting way too much nutrients in it that wouldn't normally get that much. And as a result of being super over nutrified by agriculture or by people's lawns, being over fertilized and that running off into some water body, that encourages the growth of this plant. So this plant is very small and you can see here it's sort of, it doesn't have to invest a lot of energy in the vascular system because it's just in the water all the time. And as a result of that, it's almost about, they say between 35 and 40 something percent protein. You can see the tiny little babies there, and then the larger ones, and the yellow leaves are the older ones, and then these are the root masses that go down into the water. And they propagate pretty much vegetatively. This little area here, I've been harvesting not that many, probably about 5 times this year. I came down here and harvested a couple of 5-gallon buckets, and I'll show you how I use it later on. But this stuff is pretty ubiquitous. It's in a lot of spots, so it would be pretty easy to access it, even if it weren't here in a ditch right on my farm. There are any number of little municipal water bodies and ponds, whatever, that I drive by that have it, where you could go get it. Incredibly, it has more protein than soybeans. So 43% at the high end of protein is really phenomenal. And it takes a lot of energy to grow that kind of protein, whether you're growing beans, soybeans, or raising meat. So because of that, it's sort of recognized by a lot of international and agencies and organizations to help development in third world countries. This is an incredible protein source for areas that have, protein deficiency, essentially. And it can help feed fish, and it can help feed livestock, and it can actually help feed people. You could eat this. You could dry this out and eat it. It tastes really pondy. It tastes like pond scum. It's not the most pleasant flavor, but it certainly has the protein that people need. And then in addition to that, it has all these incredible benefits for the water body itself. So why is this water nutrified? It's because we're in a wetland, and this is a wetland these are the farm fields that this had been drained about 100 years ago. And so all of these channels where the excess water can flow out just naturally have very high nutrients. I don't use any synthetic fertilizers. I do use some manures I don't get any into here, but certainly a little bit of nitrogen or something like that in the manure probably leaches in to the water here. We try to minimize that by using catch crops and stuff like that, but I'm sure some amount of it happens anyway. But regardless, even if there were no farming happening here, there probably would still be duckweed because this type of soil just has high nitrogen. This is a eutrophic area. So in addition to that, it prevents light from reaching lower in the water column, which prevents other algal growth, and that's actually good for most of the invertebrates and the vertebrates that live in there. So it has a filtering effect by taking out phosphorus, potassium, taking out nitrogen. So it's a really high value for phytoremediation projects. And essentially it takes all of these, what are pollutants in the waterways, removes them and turns them into a high value forage, whether that's for fish, people, ducks. Tons of waterfowl eat this stuff and move it around from water body to water body. It can clean up wastewater, sewage, effluent, all that kind of thing. This is a sort of actually silver bullet for water quality that has overly high nutrients. So that being said, I'm gonna harvest some using a really janky little pond skimmer and a 5-gallon bucket, let the water out, and I'm gonna bring it up to a little pond that we have in the chicken yard, and we'll see what they do with it. So after about 10 minutes of sloshing around in the muck here, I've got a 5-gallon bucket. If one were to just dry this out, of course it's gonna lose most of its weight because it's water, but maybe you spend half a day gathering buckets of this stuff, wheelbarrows, ideally into something that can drain, so like a slotted bottom, and then take it up and dry it on a straw mat or something like that, one thin layer in the sun. And it's so small that it probably could dry really easily. I haven't done this, but if you spread it out over a really thin layer, I'm sure it dries really quick in the sun. And that's 40%, let's say, protein. I don't think that there's any activity that someone could do to more quickly harvest protein. From hunting to growing beans or whatever else, there's no faster way to get this amount of protein. So in a real subsistence type of situation, it probably would make more sense to be out here harvesting duckweed and drying it out and preserving protein for food than basically any other activity I could think of. By contrast to the duckweed, we've got our little field of beans here. These are rattlesnake beans. Red beans. These are all 4 green beans, and they're delicious, and we haven't put a ton of work into this little spot, but there's a good spot. Well, we just picked these. So we've been harvesting probably about 100 pounds or so a week off here for a couple months. So it's certainly not an insubstantial amount of protein, but of course, these are green beans. We're not talking about dry beans. If you actually waited for these to like finish maturing and then dried them out and took the shells off, the total that you would harvest, I would say from this whole field would maybe be like, and this is a super ballpark, I've never done that before, so I don't really know, but just judging by how much of green beans we pick, I would say you'd be lucky to end up with like maybe 200 pounds of dried beans, maybe. And those are, gosh, I don't know, but I think those are like 20 8% protein. I gotta look that up. I may be way off base with dried beans. That might even be high. But anyway, all that work, you know, we had to put the stakes in, we had to weed. This is just bare ground, so we had to weed it like 10 times and then pick them and then thresh them. So all of that work to get that amount of protein, whereas with the duckweed, you just go and pick it up and dry it. So here's the other end. This is where I put the duckweed. We're at the very bottom of the chicken yard now. And I found this little pond, whatever, on the side of the road one day, and I highly suggest that you all do that if possible. Originally it was buried a little bit better than this, but the chickens always dig out around the edges, so I just have some logs and stuff there. So this water is collected from that roof of this little shed and goes into a rain barrel right there. There's that gutter, collects it into that rain barrel, and then there's a spigot and a hose that I can put to different spots. I can fill this with it, or I can put it into the little greenhouse if that needs water. And so it sort of just gets, I don't know, random watering to refill the pond if necessary. Most of the time it doesn't need it, but a few times this year, because we've had a really wet year, it hasn't needed much, but I've needed to refill a little bit from the roof here. So I'm about to probably put another 25 to 50 gallons in. We'll see what that gets us. Anyway, the duckweed does a couple other things. By covering the surface of the water, it prevents such extreme evaporation, so it actually retains water much better this way. And you would think that if there was a place where water was going to get really putrid and disgusting, it would be just a standing pool of water in a chicken yard. And that would be true if not for the duckweed. The chicken is having trouble reaching right now, so we're going to raise the water level. And this is just ambient duckweed in the environment, reproducing from the last time that I put it in here. I haven't refilled, so I'm going to put that bucket that I just harvested in here. It has this pretty cool way of just figuring itself out. There'll be a blob there for a bit, and then it'll sort of just dissipate. And so this is the compost glacier slowly moving down the hill. Probably do a video on that at some point as I've developed it a little bit better. But anyway, just turn this little valve here. This is what we captured last night. We had our first rain in a little while. And here we go. So other than earthworms and pill bugs and all kinds of other stuff that the compost attracts and protein that's involved in there, this is the only supplemental protein that I give them. And it's phenomenal. A few times throughout the season, the protein source dwindled. I came by and I saw that the pond was empty because the duckweed is in here reproducing vegetatively, and that happens really quickly. But if they really start eating a lot of it, they can diminish it. I probably just need a pool that's twice as large or 10 fewer chickens or whatever. But at any rate, the egg production dropped off by half. It happened 2 times through the season, and the egg production dropped off by half within a few days of them not having access to this. So protein is usually the limiting factor for eggs, and when they have plenty of this, they're almost at peak egg production. It's as though I'm buying soybean meal and giving it to them. And this is easy to find, easy to propagate. You don't need to do anything special to aerate the water. It does all the aerating. It creates a little amphibian habitat. There's weird little animals crawling in here. Probably leeches or slugs or other stuff that lives in water that I don't really understand or know about. At any rate, if you're looking for a free, very easy to maintain supplement for protein for animals, this is it. Almost doesn't look like it would catch the water, but it does. The water goes down in those little troughs, and that makes it right into a slit in the pipe. It's just cut in half there. You can see the light in the middle. It was a little bit more extremely before, but now it's sort of needs a little bit of repair, but still caught the water from last night. Maybe missed a little bit. Just falls into there. A little more detail on how this system was installed, how it's supposed to work. You can see that the pipe is cut in half, it's sort of flexible, and it's opened up around and then sort of sewn together with metal wire and holes into the sheet metal, just little ones.